Hey everyone, it's February 21st, 2025, and man, we've got a really packed news day ahead of us. Today, we're going to do a deep dive on three major stories that could really impact your wallet, the energy sector, and even businesses operating overseas. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's get to it.
I think what's fascinating today is how these stories all touch on the complex interplay between economic policy, international relations, and domestic politics. Even though they seem totally separate at first, it's going to be interesting to untangle it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, first up, the IRS. They just announced some pretty big changes to the tax code coming in 2025. They say it's all about fighting, what is it, bracket creep? Basically meaning inflation is pushing people into higher tax brackets, even if their real income hasn't actually gone up.
Right, and for a lot of people listening, this is probably hitting close to home. What the IRS is doing is increasing standard deductions. So married couples filing jointly, they'll now have a $30,000 deduction, and single filers get $15,000. They're also bumping up the limits for how much you can save in retirement accounts, like your 401k. The new limit is $23,500, plus an extra $7,500 catch-up contribution if you're 50 or over.
And hold on, there's even more. If you're between 60 and 63, you get an even bigger catch-up contribution, an extra $11,250 on top of that. So, for those of you thinking about retirement, this could be huge. But I'm curious, does this actually solve the bracket creep problem in the long run?
That is the million-dollar question. These changes might help right away, especially for folks nearing retirement, but some economists aren't so sure about how well they'll work long-term. Inflation is tricky, and we don't know if these adjustments will really be enough to offset it over time. It'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. All right, let's move on to energy policy. Things are heating up between Representative Troy Balderson, a Republican from Ohio, and President Trump. Balderson is publicly criticizing some of Trump's executive orders on energy. He's arguing that they could actually hurt energy policy and economic growth. And for context, Balderson heads the House Energy Action Team.
This is important because President Trump has been really active with executive orders since his second term started, over 100 of them, actually, and lots focused on energy and the economy. Balderson isn't just complaining either. He recently had this roundtable with energy leaders where they specifically talked about speeding up power generation projects, which seems to go against some of what the president is doing.
Oh, and another thing. Balderson's criticism comes right after that executive order imposing a 25% tariff on goods from Canada and Mexico. Remember that one? So could this be a sign of a bigger rift in the Republican Party? I mean, are they splitting on economic and energy issues?
It's definitely possible. I mean, disagreements within parties happen all the time, sure. But the timing here and how public Balderson is being with his criticism, it raises some eyebrows. This could point to some deeper divisions, especially when it comes to executive power and its impact on the economy. Makes you wonder what's going to happen to the Republicans, right? And the whole energy sector, too. Could this whole thing lead to, policy gridlock? Or maybe even a total shift in what the Republicans think about energy.
Yeah, really make you think. Okay, well, speaking of executive power, our next story takes us into the world of international business. President Trump, again using an executive order, has put a pause on all new investigations and enforcement actions, too. It's all related to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. You might know it as the FCPA.
Oh, yeah, the FCPA. So basically, this 180-day pause is giving Attorney General Pam Bondi time to rethink the FCPA guidelines. It's a pretty big move, don't you think?
Yeah, for sure, a bold move. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the FCPA, basically it's a bunch of rules. They say that U.S. companies can't bribe foreign officials to get ahead in business, so why hit pause on it?
Well, President Trump said he thinks the way we do FCPA enforcement right now is actually hurting American businesses, on the global stage. It puts them at a disadvantage compared to companies from other countries.
So he's saying the FCPA, like it is right now, is bad for U.S. economic competitiveness.
Exactly. And get this, Attorney General Bondi also has to prioritize corruption cases that involve transnational criminal organizations and drug cartels, too. So it seems like they're changing their focus.
That's interesting. It sounds like they're moving away from the usual FCPA violations and going after groups that are maybe a more direct threat to national security. But I wonder, what does this pause mean for U.S. companies that work overseas?
That's the big question. For businesses, this is a lot of uncertainty. They're wondering how these new guidelines are going to affect how they work, their compliance procedures, and their bottom line, too. Some people are worried that if we relax enforcement, it could actually make corruption more likely.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And beyond just businesses, could this pause affect our relationships with other countries, too? I mean, a lot of people see the FCPA as the gold standard for fighting corruption worldwide.
Totally. The U.S. has always said it's leading the fight against corruption. And this move could hurt our credibility on the international stage. Other countries might think we're taking a step back, and it could make it harder to work together on anti-corruption stuff.
So we've got the economy, politics, and even international relations all tie up in this. This FCPA story is a real can of worms.
Yeah, it definitely shows how complicated it is to try and promote economic interests while also keeping up ethical standards in a globalized world.
It makes you wonder, are all these stories really as separate as they seem? I mean, the tax changes, the energy policy fight, this FCPA pause.
That's the thing, isn't it? On one hand, you have these efforts to boost the U.S. economy, but it might make the gap between the rich and everyone else even bigger. Then there's the energy policy clash. People are worried about executive overreach and that it's going to divide the country even more. And then there's this whole reshaping of how the U.S. deals with corruption globally, which could change how businesses operate and affect international relations. It's a lot to process.
It really is. It's almost like someone is playing 3D chess with the world economy. Or maybe it's just how unpredictable things are globally in 2025. Either way, it's a wild time to be following the news.
Yeah, it definitely keeps things interesting. And it just shows how important critical thinking is. We have to understand how seemingly random events are actually connected. Yeah, it really does feel like, I don't know, things are getting shaken up both here and in the rest of the world. So much going on at once. Hard to say how it'll all turn out.
Yeah, no kidding. It's like, what's the plan here? Is the administration doing all this on purpose, like some grand strategy? Or are they just reacting to things as they come up and maybe causing unintended consequences?
You know, that's the question I keep asking myself. Is there a plan, or are they just throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks? I honestly don't think we know yet, which I guess is what makes it so interesting to watch.
Right. Total mystery. But one thing's for sure, all these changes, whether they were planned or not, are going to affect real people here in the U.S. and everywhere else.
I think that's the big takeaway for everyone listening today. This isn't just some theoretical policy debate happening in a vacuum. These decisions affect businesses, people, entire countries in the real world. It's important to stay informed, understand what could happen, and talk about where we're headed.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that's what we try to do here, right? On the Videntis podcast, we dig deep, we connect the dots, we try to make sense of things, even when things are still, blurry.
Absolutely. We're all trying to figure this stuff out together. And hopefully, by talking about these issues, we can help our listeners be more informed and engaged citizens.
Well said. So to all our listeners, keep thinking critically about this. What other connections are there between these stories? What could happen in the long run? Keep exploring these questions and let us know what you think. We want to hear from you.
Yeah, remember, the news never stops, and neither should we. Stay curious, stay involved, and stay tuned for more deep dives right here on the Videntis podcast.
And with that, we're wrapping up our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, stay informed and stay curious.